Welcome to the Susan Brender Show. It's all about you, featuring shows on health and wellness, the performing arts, politics, and people who inspire you to be your very best. And now, here's Susan Brender.
I am Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. Today, my guest is Elise Collins. Now, Elise has a very interesting story and a very interesting book called Super Ager. She has a passion and a life purpose. Her firm belief is that when we take care of our bodies, our purpose and our dharma emerges from the foundation of health. Elise has authored 3 books on healthy living. Her latest, Super Ager, inspires readers to optimize their well-being for longevity in the 21st century and beyond. And I want to welcome to my show Elise Marie Collins.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here.
Okay, let's jump right in. Now, you wrote this book called Super Ager. First of all, I thank you for sending it to me because I read it, and boy, can I relate to it. Now, the definitive how-to book is one of the things that Darren Main, who's the author of Yoga and the Path of Urban Mystic, wrote about your book. He said, this is a how-to book for celebrating the second half of life. Now, people are living longer and longer and longer, and a lot of them do not have quality of life. And they ask, or they say, what's the purpose of my living longer if I can't enjoy my life? But you have some suggestions and some things that you want to tell them. So I would like you to discuss, if you will, what is it that they can do at the second half of their life that will make those golden years very special?
Well, first, I would come back to what is the purpose, and that's something I cover in my book. It's really important to know your purpose. And we can get caught up in how we think about our purpose. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It could be something very simple. Ikigai is a word that they use in Japan on the island of Ojimi, where people live longer than any other place in the world. And their ikigai can be something as simple as tending to my garden or enjoying time with my friends. So you want to think about what you really love to do. What are you passionate about? And then tap into that. And when you have that purpose, then it's a lot easier to line up and begin to, if you need to change your habits or if you need to be a little bit healthier, then when you have an idea of why you're here, it makes it a lot more, I don't want to say easier, but when you have that sense of purpose, you have a drive to be more healthy and change things that need to be changed, and I think that can be done at any age.
In your book, you talk about daily habits. Now, I think that's very important to have certain habits so that when you wake up in the morning, you know where your purpose lies, okay? And if you were meeting somebody and giving them information about this very important subject, which is purposefulness, and also, mindfulness and various other things that make people happy, what would those suggestions be?
Well, number one, I would say begin your day with gratitude. We often, as humans, our brains are actually wired to think of danger, think of the negative for safety reasons. But we can rewire our brain. When you wake up, I suggest to my health coaching clients that they write down or at least think about 1 to 5 things that they're grateful for. And you can also begin to write gratitudes before they've even happened. So I could write, I am grateful that I now speak Italian, even though I only know a little bit of Italian. Something like that. It gets you to think about your goals in a way that you're grateful rather than, I haven't done that yet. And then just a few simple put in place, start with something small. That's how we change our habits, something very small. So if you don't exercise, maybe you could just put your exercise shoes by your door, and then you see them, and that starts to create this pattern. oh, maybe I'll exercise. And then the next week you could up that and you could put your shoes on. And then the next week you could start to take a walk, maybe just around the block. Maybe then the next week you go 2 blocks. So we build habits easily when we make very small incremental changes. Most of us, I think especially in the Western world, I don't know why, but we tend to create these overwhelming and impossible goals when we should be starting with something like ridiculously small.
Yeah, you mentioned something very interesting to me anyway, because I travel a lot, and I watch and I observe how people are living their lives in different countries around the world. There's a lot of poverty. There's a lot of problems that exist in these countries, even war, for example. But yet, the people in those places seem to be, really happy, happier than we are because of, the stress level that we're dealing with, because everybody, the issue in this country is money. Money, money, money. Power, 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 power. You don't find that in different places, and people seem to be happy. Have you experienced that? And if so, I'd like you to tell a story about it.
Yes, I really have, and I think I haven't been to the island of Ojimi, but just to come back to the Ikigai, that's where just a simple purpose is so important. It doesn't need to be about money or power. And I've traveled to India, and that's why I lean heavily on what is called the science of life, and it's really almost like a theory and a way of viewing life, a way of becoming more healthy. It's called Ayurveda. And in Ayurveda, you have different stages of life. And the first stage is when you're in childhood, and that's the earth stage. And then the middle stage is fire, and that's more about power, because you mentioned power. So I'm telling a story about Ayurveda in India. And then the final stage is air, when you have wisdom and when you see with perspective. So when I was in India, I went to Ayurveda centers, and you see a very different way of life, but you also see elders, older adults who are looked up to and seen as having wisdom. I think that in our Western culture, because it can also, sometimes now we're in a global culture, so sometimes the Western values are even in countries that may not have had these values, but that idea that everything is about power, I think part of the super aging trend is to go beyond that. That's no longer serving us as humans. We're destroying the planet, and when we're thinking only about power, it's like we're stuck in that middle stage of life. So we need to learn from the super agers, we need to learn from the older adults, and we also need to respect that perspective and wisdom of what I would even call the element of air.
Mm-hmm. Well, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. There's no question. But does our society, and I'm talking about, say, the millenniums, do they respect older people? And it seems to me that when an older person goes for a job, for example, because some of them have to work because of, the money situation isn't particularly great for everybody. Now, that said, if a person who is older goes for a job, generally speaking, it's very hard for them to get that job because the people who hire them think that, they're going to take advantage of a lot of the health benefits and this benefit and that benefit, and we can pay a young person less. So that's what we're dealing with in our society today, a society that doesn't understand the worth of somebody who is older.
I totally agree. I also see a different side where there's a subtle shift, and you mentioned millennials. I've noticed a couple things. I can tell a couple stories. One is there is someone named Batty Winkle, and she is an Instagram star. She just turned 90 this Summer, and millennials love her. She has like 3.2 million followers on Instagram.
Wow.
And she works with her great-granddaughter, and she's like a party girl. If you see images of her, she looks like she's always at a rave. She dresses colorful clothing, shall we say, and millennials love her and look up to her, and she also has a lot of older followers. So there's role models that are doing the opposite. I think we have to look for them, and as older adults, I think we need to, if we feel like there's a job, and I mean, unfortunately, it's very true. There is a lot of ageism and age discrimination. My suggestion would be it's going to take a certain amount of perseverance, but I think there is opportunities and open-minded people. And part of my mission is to help amplify the message that older adults have so much to contribute. And I think generations should be working together. I'm a firm believer in intergenerational collaboration and communication, and I think it's essential for our society to integrate the generations and the generational knowledge.
You're absolutely right. I agree with you on every bit of what you just said, because you're right. I've met so many interesting people in my field, for example, who are doing all kinds of incredible things. But let's get back to your book for a moment. You talk about the science of gratitude. You talk about humor. Now, humor, as far as I'm concerned, is one of the most important things that we can have. We need a sense of humor, because the things that are going on in this world, not even in this country, in this world, can be very tragic. So without a sense of humor, you're going to be very depressed and very anxious. I think that's really the case. Do you agree with me?
Oh, I completely agree. I've used my sense of humor my entire life, and it's gotten me, that's my go-to mode is to, I was actually the class clown when I was in middle school.
Really?
Yes, I was.
I mean, I don't know you that well, but I didn't think that you sounded like the class clown, but you are a very wise person. But, yeah, go on. Tell more of the story.
Yeah, I think that I came from a family that was very intellectual, and so they valued intelligence. So I decided that humor was something that I really wanted to develop, and so I was very proud that I made the class clown, because it seemed kind of outside of the skills that I grew up with, shall we say. But I think finding humor and finding it's humanity. We're all human, and I think in that we spoke about the pursuit of power, and what comes with that is a pursuit of perfection. And I think that pursuit of perfection is very that is not going to work. To live a long life, we have to accept our humanity, and so humor helps us to do that, because we can all be humble with humor. Yeah, that's interesting. And let's get into other things that you talk about in your book, which is, again, all about diet, too, and how that affects your health. In addition to that, you talk about exercise, you talk about journaling, you talk about all of those ultimate body things that really make a difference, sleep being another thing. So go down the list a little bit for our audience and tell them about a number of things that they could do, which is very natural. I mean, easy to do, doesn't cost you anything. What are the different steps that you can take in your life to feel better and to live a longer life? Yeah, so I just wanted to preface everything by telling your listeners that the best thing that they can do is just be gentle on yourself. It comes with that sense of humor, because, some of the super-agers actually, the man that's the oldest man in the United States, he's 109, and he likes cigars and ice cream. So I just want to start with that, because you don't have to be perfect, and sometimes being very loving can be a really important habit. That being said, the more that we can cultivate these health habits, and I advocate doing it very slowly and take your time. If you don't want to jump into anything too quickly, and if you're going to live a long life, you have plenty of time to change your diet, to exercise, and so on and so forth. So I also think, start with the thing that would be easiest for you. So if that's exercise, I mentioned walking. Walking is an excellent form of exercise. Maybe you'd like to do dance. You could take a dance class. Depending on what stage of life you are, yoga. I'm a yoga teacher. There's chair yoga. Chair yoga can be done by everyone from 0 to 100. You can hold a baby on your lap and do chair yoga with a baby. So everything in yoga can be adapted. And then you mentioned diet. There's a lot that I go into in the book. And I also want to say that it's really important that all these things that I give in the book, I really focus specifically on things that if they cost something, they don't cost a lot, because I think the lifestyle that increases the health span, it doesn't really cost any money. I mean, it may cost have some instrumental value, like if you sign up for a class, for example, or you buy certain foods. But there's always going to be habits that don't cost that much, and I want to emphasize those because those alone will increase your lifespan and your health span. And there's a science in the book that will back that up.
Just before we started to do the show, I decided to use my brain a little bit because, here I interview people, I research what they're all about, I read their books, I do all of that, but I never really give myself the time to deal, with different games that I can do. So I did a Sudoku puzzle. It frustrated me completely. However, when I completed it, I felt a sense of gratitude that my brain is still working, that it's, it desires to be bigger, better, deal with all kinds of issues that ordinarily I would find very difficult, but somehow it opens up my brain to thinking. If you were to give some advice to, again, our listeners, what would you say about games as an example?
Yeah, great question. So games, one thing I'll mention is Sudoku is great, but the more you can play games that incorporate your senses, that's why something like painting or cooking, now those aren't necessarily games, but you can do what we call gamify. That's another way to change your habits. You can gamify them, especially if you're someone who likes to win games. You could challenge a friend, how many nights a week are you going to cook? Or you could challenge someone, if someone's up for that, to another, do you want to take a painting class with me? Do you think we could do it? That's a way to gamify things. So things like crossword puzzles and Sudoku, they use your brain, but for overall body workout, that's why I said music, because music, or if I mentioned music, playing a musical instrument is a great way to work out your brain because you have to hear. You may read music, or you have to look at your hand if you're playing like guitar or some kind of instrument that you use your hands. Or singing, you don't have to use your hands, but you'll also have to listen and adjust in your body. So those are really great brain-body workouts.
Right. Now, there are people who are listening to this discussion that we're having, and I'm sure they're saying to themselves, well, okay, we have kids now who are always on the phone or always doing video games and all these different things that deal with, the new the new paradigm, which is, okay, let's get a better and better and better device, okay? And I personally and I have to say this to you. I personally, when I see everybody on the phone and when I see them, on the computer, I mean, I'm talking about even 2-year-olds who are given these iPads to do, all kinds of things. Now, do you think that this is good for the brain, and would you recommend something different that parents can do for their kids to make them a little bit more engaged?
Yes, and I want to say your health span begins at conception, literally. So your aging trajectory starts in as a young person, and I do think, I don't think we're going to be able to get rid of the devices, and I don't think that's what we want to do, but the more mindful activities that you can like if you're a grandparent, for example, having your grandchildren, maybe go paint and draw with them. Take them on a walk without their devices. One of the things that I do, I teach children's yoga, and I also am developing, this may be my next book, intergenerational yoga, because you can do yoga for all ages. I've actually done yoga classes with great-grandparents, grandparents, parents, and children. And what these groups have told me is that this is an activity we can all do away from our devices, and we all feel good and we have a good time. So there's many activities, and as a grandparent especially, you're in a perfect position, or even a parent, to guide your children or grandchildren or even great-grandchildren to do mindful activities that engage the senses and are away from devices.
Yeah. Now, you talk about yoga a lot because obviously you're involved in yoga, and you do a lot of yoga with people, and you teach them, and you get involved in getting people to really enjoy the experiences they have when they're meditating or when they're doing yoga and breathing and, doing this mindful thing, if you call it. Now, explain one more time, what is exactly mindfulness? Because I hear that from a lot of doctors. They talk about being in the moment, mindfulness, that kind of thing. What's your definition of that?
Yeah, mindfulness is really just being present. You don't necessarily have to meditate. And you brought up taking a painting class. Taking that painting class, something like painting will bring you into the moment because you're sitting there, you're applying the paintbrush and the paint in that moment. Anything where you're paying attention to what you're doing right now. That's why it involves your senses. Cooking, you have to pay attention to what you're doing. If not, it could be dangerous. You might burn yourself or, make the dish incorrectly.
Right. That's true. I love what you're telling our audience about the simple things that they can do to help themselves. And I think that your book will give them a lot more information. So if they want to get your book, or if they want to speak to you, if they want some advice from you, how do they do that?
Great question. So my website is EliseMarieCollins.com. And my email is the same, my full name, EliseMarieCollins@gmail.com. And you're welcome to send me an email, and I can talk to you about any health habits or anything you want to change. I'd welcome doing a short consultation with any of your listeners. You can buy the book on Amazon, and you can also get it pretty much everywhere. It's on Kindle and all major, you can order it through a bookstore as well.
Let me ask you something, because I think that this is important. Everybody who I have on the show has something that they want to say, which unfortunately I didn't ask them. So there must be something that we're leaving out. What is that? And by all means, take as much time as you have to explain some things that we really haven't discussed yet.
I think I'd like to tell a story about maybe Tao Porchon Lynch, and she's the oldest yoga teacher in the world. She just turned 100 in August, and she began doing yoga when she was a young girl growing up in India. she saw some boys doing something, and it was yoga, and she thought it was a game. And then she said, I want to do that. So she started doing yoga as a young girl, and then she's had an incredible life. So if you live in 100 years, this is the kind of life you could live. She marched with Gandhi. She was a Hollywood actress. Now she's a yoga teacher. You can actually take yoga classes with her in upstate New York.
Really?
And she's also a ballroom dancer. She started dancing when she was in her 80s. And she has a great TED Talk that I would recommend looking up. It's called something like You Can Do Anything. That's not exactly the title, but it pretty much, her message is so inspirational and timeless. So please watch it. And I would say if you see her, you'll see her what she does and what she says. And I'll leave you with one of the things she says about health and healing is that we are like trees. You know, you see a tree now in the fall and the leaves fall off, but then in the spring the tree regenerates. So we always have that potential to regenerate, and I think we have that potential to change and grow at any age, and I've seen that over and over in my own life and in the stories of the super agers.
It's terrific, really interesting. I want to just tell our audience one more thing. In Super Agers, you will discover, and here's a list of things, how to physically condition yourself at any age to maintain health and mobility, essential brain fitness and memory maintenance tips to stay sharp. That's pretty good. The essential superfoods, vitamins, and minerals, and what they do to promote health and prevent the reverse disease. The values and cultural habits of the world's eldest to promote longevity. And last but not least, how to stay involved in your community and nurture relationships for a fulfilling life. And what could be better than that, a fulfilling life? I loved ending our interview with that kind of thing that you wrote, how to nurture relationships for a fulfilling life. My guest today has been an amazing person who I think talks about getting younger and looking younger and having more energy and a better memory and a long life and a healthy life. And her name is Elise Marie Collins. Thank you for being on the Susan Brender Show, Elise, and come back. I think you have a lot to say, and I think our audience will learn a lot from you as well.
I would love to. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to The Susan Brender Show. To be a guest, email sebrender@yahoo.com.